Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thank you so much for joining us as we walk through the 7 secrets of daily fantasy golf. My name is Andy Baldacci. I'm the CEO of SaberSim, and I'm joined by DFS pros, SaberSim partners, and twin brothers, Max and Danny Steinberg. How's it going, guys?
Really good, Andy.
That's
Excited about the Masters.
I'm very excited about the Masters as well and excited to shoot this video. Let's do it.
Yeah, so we're recording this the week of the Masters, but the content we're going to talk about really is going to apply week in, week out throughout the season and just give you the tips that you need to know to stand apart from the field and build winning lineups for daily fantasy golf. So let's jump into it. Danny, do you want to kick things off on the first secret of beating daily fantasy golf?
Yeah, so first secret is fade the field. So there's a lot of variance in daily fantasy golf. The top projected golfers and the lowest projected golfers aren't going to have like a gigantic difference between them. And sometimes the best golfers do miss the cut or do really badly. So if you can find a completely under the radar play who's going to do really well, or you can find a popular golfer who's going to have really high ownership to fade, that can give you a lot of edge, especially in GPPs where the payouts are really top heavy.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add as well, I think the differences between the golfer that might fit the narrative that everyone likes, who has like the course history, the long driving, all this good stuff, and someone who doesn't have all of that, but is a pretty skilled player, can just be a couple of points. And so I think sometimes we want to play the golfers that have all the things going for them, but you can find these under the radar plays by choosing guys who are skilled but just don't have all those narratives going for them.
No, I feel like that kind of actually ties into another video that we had, Max, where you're talking about adjusting lineups and using the filtering tools that we have at SaberSim, where sometimes there are not major differences between a couple options. And looking at the golfers here, you can have some who, like you're saying, are very closely projected, but their ownerships are way out of whack. So it's usually going to be good to pick that lower owned play because you're not really sacrificing that much equity in terms of like winning outright. Is that accurate?
Yeah, totally. And just following on, I mean, sometimes you'll have like old golfers who no one wants to play because they're old and you think, oh, they can't win a tournament, but they really can. Or like the hot young stud tends to be kind of overrun. So sometimes there's just biases when it comes to age too.
So you're going to have the ugly old golfer lineup in the contest this week, Danny?
I take pride in playing the old golfers.
Perfect. So number 2.
Yeah, so 6 out of 6. You're not going to win the tournament unless all 6 of your golfers make the cut. So playing a lineup where everyone has a chance to make the cut is great, and being able to find like a deep value play, someone who's really cheap, who is probable to make the cut, that can really improve the EV of your lineups.
And what are you looking for in this case? Because like obviously the sites aren't putting out completely ridiculous salaries. Like they usually are like decently predictive of a player's ability. So what are you looking at to try to find the people who might have a better chance of making the cut than the salary would imply?
Yeah, for me, I mean, some of the stuff I look at is the strokes gain data over on stats.pga.com. I like looking at recent performance in long game. I was actually a golfer all 4 years on my varsity golf team and made state 3 out of the 4 years. So I have some theories of my own of what could be good signals for PGA golfers, and I feel like, you know, recent performance in the long game. I think long game recent performance can matter a lot more than with short game. So I like looking at guys who have done really well in the long game, and also just people who are long drivers in general. People who can get eagles. I think it's important. That's important for upside too.
And then the next one is on course history. And what are your thoughts there, Danny?
Yeah, so a lot of people like talking about course history, where people, you know, think, oh, this golfer on this course just always does well. So, you know, you should play him this week. I think people have shown that that sort of thing does matter, but it only matters a little bit. And the reality is these people who have really good course history get really high ownerships anyway. So I don't read it too much into course ownership in general. I think there's some edge in fading people who have really good course history.
Max, so you actually built the model for SaberSim's golf projections. And what did you find as you were doing the research for that, as you're really building out the inputs and everything that goes into it? What were some of the findings you had there? Because again, course history is something we hear talked about so much. And Danny mentioned like it does have some impact, but just what are your thoughts there? And maybe if it's not so important, what does matter?
Yeah, so I think, one of the biggest elements probably of course history is course fit, right? It's how does this player in theory fit to the course? A lot of people think, okay, someone's a long driver, they're going to be better at par fives, right? Someone maybe is more accurate hitter, maybe they're better at par threes and fours. And what I would like to point out is that our model is fit on the attributes of the course. Like it's a hole by hole model. It has to do with the length, the par, different attributes of the course, right? And what I did find is that, not surprisingly, long drivers and more skilled players do a lot better on par fives than unskilled players, where par three and par four, the skill levels are closer together. So when you're thinking about making adjustments to your projections or trying to figure out who to play, we're already going to be taking into account, par five scorings, driving distance, length of holes, difficulty of holes, things like that. And so do not do something where you're trying to double count those factors when adjusting projections. We're already baking it in and focus on other things like trying to find the more skilled golfers or other factors. Maybe they're a member at the course, or maybe there's something to do with weather that you can factor in. Try to really adjust on different factors aside from that.
And I think to kind of boil things down a little bit, it seems like when it comes to course history, that like you said, if someone's a member there and like they really know that course, that can matter. But when you're looking at the history of how they performed on the tour at this course, the sample size is just gonna be pretty small. Golf's high variance, and like you can read, there's a lot of noise in that. And so
Right.
what Max, it sounded to me like you were getting at is course fit, which is a little bit more general than that, is saying, okay, is this a long course? Is this like, what are the variables of the course? That's something you can boil down more accurately than say looking at like an exact course, how many times they've played this and how they're doing on that one course, right?
Yeah, and I'm just restating what Danny said. There's value in it. I'm sure smarter people than me have shown that there's value in it, but it usually gets negated by the fact that this is what everyone's looking at. And there are these, the players who have won a bunch at this course, who've had really good strokes gained, they're going to be the highest owned golfers anyway. So I think it's a dangerous and not helpful path to go down.
All right, the fourth secret is watch the weather. Max, you want to take over here?
Yeah, I think watching the weather can be, and it's not always, but it can be a really important part of your golf process, because there are certain situations that there's going to be a better weather split. Like every golfer has a different tee times. The tee times can be in the morning or the afternoon, and they're split on different days.
Right. And if someone
yeah.
has a morning tee time, they always have an afternoon tee time the next day. And if someone has
Right.
an afternoon tee time, they always have a morning tee time the next day.
Right. So in the first, right. So in the first two rounds, sometimes you get a situation where there's one day where the morning the wind is calm, and then the afternoon the wind is really strong and gusty, and then the next day the wind will just be calm all the way. And so, or maybe it's reversed or something like that. And so you'll get situations where there's actually an advantage to having a particular set of tee times. And so you want to look at a website like weather.gov. Some people use Weather Underground. I've heard sites like Windy. You can look at, there's people on Twitter who are forecast people. They'll give you a detailed weather forecast. But the bottom line is that you want to really take a look at this, especially on Wednesday or the night before a tournament, because you can find, okay, well, there's actually an advantage. You'll see. So I'm looking at weather.gov's thing, and you'll see this is the wind thing. And you can see for Augusta, actually, there is not really any difference between the morning and night wind. So there is going to be rain, but it seems like it's going to be raining all weekend, so there's not going to be an effect. But you basically want to look for situations where there's calm wind in the morning and a lot of wind in the afternoon, or a lot of wind in the morning and not a lot of wind in the afternoon, and see if there's an advantage. It can also, there's certain situations, and it's much more rare and harder to find, but there's some situations where the course is dry, it rains, there's a weather delay, the course gets softened up, and then it's an advantage for those players who play most of their holes after the course softens up. So it's something to look for, it's something to pay attention to. That being said, be a little cautious with it. A lot of times when the wind's under 10 miles an hour, it doesn't make that big of a difference, but it can make a really big difference if you can get those situations where there's a huge split between the tee times.
Yeah, and I just thought of this, but also I think possibly weather can have an impact on the skill difference between the top and the best and the worst players. Like, I think it adds variance if there's going to be really bad weather. You can see really bad players or players who you never thought would win the tournament up at the top of the leaderboard. So that can make a huge difference too.
Right, absolutely.
Number 5, picking the right contests.
Yeah, so with golf, as opposed to, let's say, NFL or baseball, there's no correlations between players, or if there are, they're very little. And there's not much difference in upside between players. There's not much edge that SaberSim can give you, aside from the projections, right? We're going to build you the best lines of projections. We're going to have a little quantitative upside, but I can tell you that there's not some secret sauce there. There's pretty similar upside between players, at least related to their own skill levels. And so it means that your edge is just simply not going to be as big in daily fantasy golf as it might be in other sports. And because of that, I think game selection can be really important. You want to play single entry contests, you want to play 20 max contests, you want to avoid high stakes unless you feel like you have a really good projection edge. And those 20 max contests and single entry contests are going to be much more profitable than these big name tournaments like Millionaire Makers or even cash games or things like that. I think those are where your biggest edge are going to go. And you just want to make sure that you're game selecting, especially for your skill level and the projections that you're using.
Yeah, that builds on lessons that we covered in another video called Building a DFS Bankroll. And we kind of break down the types of contests to play. It's sticking to the low stakes, it's sticking to the lower entry caps, that kind of thing, because there is a significant impact in the difficulty of the contest, and choosing the right ones will make a huge difference on your profitability. Secret number 6, leverage data.
PGA.com actually offers a lot of really great, really cool, completely free stats on their website. And they have things like driving distance, driving accuracy, and they also have strokes gain data, which is essentially just parsing out different aspects of a player's game. We're talking about driving, approach shots, around the green, putting, and essentially weighting their scoring with these different aspects of their game against the field that they're playing. So it's going to be a more accurate representation of how skilled someone is in a certain aspect of their game. They have a lot of really detailed stats, and as Danny said before, some of these stats like strokes gain off the tee can be really stable, and if someone's really strong in that area, we can predict that they will be in the future pretty easily, while putting might not be the case. Putting has a lot of variance. So there's actually a lot of stats on here. I like diving pretty deeply into it and try to, look at things that are indicative putting skill, maybe just look at putts by my distance and looking at putts inside 10 feet to see, okay, which players are really good at the short putting and not putting and getting these long hole outs. There's a lot to look into. I mean, there's hundreds of stats here. So that's a really, really good place to go. There's also a lot of free tools on the site datagolf.com or datagolf.ca. One cool tool that they have, we're talking about course history either. They have a course history tool, and I think they quantify that really well. They have a course fit tool, which I think is very interesting. It's something that shows, okay, for this particular course, what is important, right? What is important relative to other places. They have a lot of great visuals. They have cool blogs and articles. It's a really good site. and a lot of it's free. So it's something that I go to most weeks to look into what they're saying and see what tips they might have. So there's, I'm sure, other free websites as well, but there's a lot to look at. And luckily for you, there's a lot of stuff that is just completely free of charge and is easy to just put into your process every week.
Max, how do you, and Danny, feel free to jump in too, but like, as you're navigating all of this data, I know there's not like a simple answer to this, but just generally speaking, how do you try to, one, just not get overwhelmed by all the different data points, and two, just like take that to have some kind of measurable impact in your process? Is it really just saying like you're looking for things that jump out and make you higher or lower on someone, and then you're going to boost or lower the projection? Like what kind of are you ultimately trying to do?
I think for me, the key word is adding value, right? I'm just trying to do something that is going to add value in some way to my process, right? So it is, you're right. I think it is really easy to get overwhelmed with all this stuff. But if you look at some things and find just a few players that you can add or subtract from their projection, that's going to go a long way. Even looking at sportsbook lines at head-to-heads and see how they compare with our numbers and adjusting that way. There's a lot of good information. And if you can just do that with a few players, you're really going to add to the process. And you can also just go to SaberSim. You could build and then actually say, okay, who am I getting and who do I need to focus on? Maybe focus on some key players there. There's a lot of easy ways to take all this data, which there's a lot, and simplify it in a way that you're actually going to add value to when you're actually building lineups. And so I just focus on that.
I think for me, I like trying to theorize what kind of factors are maybe not reflected as much by the historical data, because I think Max's model is going to do a great job of figuring out, based on historical data, how should these people be projected. So something like, you know, maybe if someone has improved their driving distance a lot, or some more nuanced factor that is not going to be reflected in the historical data, like maybe someone has some sort of injury, maybe they're recovered from coronavirus or have an illness of some type. Maybe their learning strategy is better, like we've seen with Bryson DeChambeau has gotten so much better over time, and that in the historical data would not suggest that he should be this good at this point, but because he is so good at learning and getting better, that he's kind of ascended to become one of the best golfers on tour.
Yeah, and I think this is a good transition into the last secret, because ultimately what all these secrets do is they give you ways to, as Max said, add value to the process, to find ways to stand out from the field and to find ways to build lineups that truly have a real chance of winning. And the thing you need to do, what the last secret comes down to, is using the right tools, because again, just if all you're doing is relying on these secrets, you're going to build strong lineups. But if you're doing this all by hand and really just digging into everything without using the right tools, whether it's the ones that Max showed you or a lineup builder, if you're doing this all on your own, it is going to take you pretty much all week to get your lineups dialed in. And between your job, your family, and just everything else that you have going on, you probably can't exactly set aside all that time leading up to the start of a tournament. I don't have that much time, and I actually run a DFS company. I think it's basically guys like Max and Danny who do this professionally, who can really, really go deep and spend all that time doing it. But for the rest of us, if you want to beat daily fantasy golf and just can't spend hours and hours researching and building lineups, then you have to use the right tool. And we have built that tool in SaberSim because we are the only lineup optimizer out there that actually understands upside so that you can build winning lineups fast. And the best part about all of this, we're not going to jump into a demo of the product or anything like that. We've got plenty of videos showing how it all works. But what you can do, though, yourself, if you are interested to see how you can put all this together very easily in your own DFS process, is try SaberSim out for free. We offer a completely free 3-day trial so that you can play around with it and see if it's right for you. all you have to do is head over to SaberSim.com to start that free trial, and you're going to be up and running and building winning lineups in no time. And if you have any questions at all as you try things out, you can always reach out to our support team at support@SaberSim.com, or even email me directly at andy@SaberSim.com, and we are always happy to help. Max and Danny, I know, spend a good amount of time on Twitter and are always happy to share their thoughts there. And so what are your guys' handles on Twitter?
I'm at Daniel Singer S.
And I'm at Max J. Steinberg.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining me today, and thank you for watching as well. I hope you got a lot out of this, and I wish you luck.